Hi, my name is Katie Kyler, if we haven't met already. I'm a open publishing and government information librarian here at the U of A, and this is the latest in our monthly Lunch and Learn series. So we're doing these on a different topic every month. They're about 30 minutes, they're virtual. And today, before I start, I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that here at the U of A, we're located on Treaty 6 territory, which is a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. I know we might not all be located in the same place, so I encourage you to reflect upon the land where you are situated as well. So today, we're very lucky to have Emily Zhang as our sorry, as our speaker. Emily is the library open publishing and digitization specialist. So she works as a part of our team to provide editor support, to set up new journals, and to troubleshoot end user issues. And she's worked closely with the OJS software since 2019 and also sits on the PKP documentation interest group. So she is definitely our resident OJS expert. And so we're really happy to have her here to talk about how to make post-production changes in OJS, why you would want to do that, and why that's important, and all of that good stuff. So on that note, I'm going to transfer it over to Emily. Please feel free to put any questions that you have into chat, and I can ask them at the end, or we can just unmute and have a question period at the end. All right, thanks. I'll hand it over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This Lunch and Learn is a short one and mostly about the practical steps of the OJS software. So I won't spend too much time talking about the rationale behind post-publication changes. However, I do want to start by talking about a few of the reasons why these changes might be necessary, and acknowledge that it's actually quite a complicated topic. So I encourage all of you who are journal editors to consider this issue before you're faced with an actual request. Broadly, there's a few things to consider addressing as you work through your publishing ethics, policies, and procedures for your journal, which should include how to handle these types of requests. Some examples of potential requests can include simple publication errors ranging from typographical errors to author identity issues, third-party copyright removal requests alleging copyright violations within a work. These are also known as takedown notices. It can also become a bit contentious, especially when it comes to ethical violations with the author, like undisclosed conflicts of interest or researcher misconduct. Those issues are rare and hard to talk about, but we always encourage you to think about it in a hypothetical sense, just in case it were to occur. Now, as for a couple of the more practical, better practices, we recommend making changes as soon as possible because the length of time that a work is publicly available allows for the incorrect information to be further disseminated through search engines as well as sharing networks. Any downstream distribution channels should also be updated if you can. This can include updating your DOIs, your DOAJ records. If you publish with the U of A library publishing program, to do these two steps, you can email us at library.publishing@ualberta.ca, and those are a part of our services. If you are indexed in any other indexing services or being aggregated by any major databases, it's a good idea to let them know of any updates. And any other channels you control, like social media, promotional channels, it's also a good idea to update those. Changes should also be made as transparent where it makes sense and is possible to do so. That said, this is a pretty complicated policy development issue. So there are some exceptions. For example, an exception to the transparency better practice is for contributor name changes for trans and gender diverse authors. In those cases, name changes should be implemented as invisibly as possible, as quickly as possible, and as comprehensively as possible. So, and the reason being that public-facing dead names can cause significant personal harm to individuals. One way of managing some of those changes is using gender-neutral and consistent identifiers, such as work ID, to consolidate authors' research output. Work ID also allows authors themselves to control their own personal research records. So that could be a good way for journals to implement. And if you have any questions about implementing Work ID in your journals, we're happy to chat about that. So there are some links in the slides if you want to follow those. With those exceptions, for the most part, we do understand that the integrity of the publication record is important and should be maintained as much as possible. This next slide is just a couple of resources that can help guide your discussions from COPE, from PKP, and from the National Library of Medicine. Another good resource could just be looking around at other journals that are similar to yours or that your readership might already be familiar with, and looking at examples of some of what they write or some of the changes that they've made to their journals. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the more practical side of how to actually implement these changes in OJS software. OJS has two main mechanisms for making post-publication changes. The first one is to unpublish and republish something in the same location as the original article. These are really good for invisible changes that you want to minimize, such as contributor name changes or small typographical errors that have no bearing on the content of the publications. You can also use these for retraction notices because this ensures that anybody who's following the links through, say, citations or social media will go back to the original place where that original article was published. Retractions should be very clear and obvious, but retain the same metadata so that it is easy to find. It should also include a transparent note from the editor about why an article was retracted. The second mechanism for implementing changes in OJS is a fairly new feature that was introduced a few years ago called versioning. So versioning is quite similar to using track changes, where both the old and new versions are openly and publicly available, and readers can easily refer back to the original version to see what changes have been made. This feature is quite good for updates or new information that it might not make sense to have a whole separate article about and is vital to the original content. Some journals also use the versioning feature for post-publication reviews. This is a version of a review process that is also a bit new and but gaining ground, where publications are reviewed by the general readership after it's been published. So if a version was posted before, those reviews have come in and then has been revised with the reviews in consideration, then versioning might be good so that all the citations are linking to the right places. Some journals also use this as sort of a hack to the rolling publication, using it for a pre-layout post-print. So when the content is finalized, but the layout hasn't been applied yet. And this allows journals to quickly make their content available online much earlier than if they had to wait for a lengthy layout process for the entire issue to go through a designer, for example, which could add time to that. So the page numbers might not be consistent. So versioning could provide ways for journals to be cited ahead of that layout. So versioning retains both the original publication and the new location, and it's pretty clear which is which, and I'll show you during the demo. There is also a possibility of creating a brand new submission as if it was a separate thing. This is not really recommended for revisions because duplication can cause a lot of reader confusion, but it can be used for retraction or visible change notices in a later issue. This was often how these kinds of notices were published back in the days of print distribution, where a notice would appear in a later issue of the same journal, citing the original article. But now that it is possible to make those changes in the original, those should be updated. So for example, if an article has been retracted and you have a retraction notice, the original retracted link should also be updated to reflect that that has happened. So when you are issuing an official notice in a later issue, it should be as quickly as possible following the first issue that after which the changes have been made. And if there are inadvertent duplications, that's also something you can let your journal administrators know so we can consolidate those. So if they are true duplicates, that was just an error in the system, we can consolidate them to make sure that future DOIs point to the same primary place. Okay, so the next section, I'll jump into our live demo of how those actually look. Before I do that, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I think I'm sharing my screen of our demo journal with a demo issue. Katie, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yep, you've got it. It's good.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is our OJS demo environment, and I'll start by showing you some of the invisible changes that can be made. From your journal, go ahead and navigate to your editor dashboard. Just a note that some of these editorial functions are only available to journal editors. If you're having trouble accessing what you need, it might be a permissions issue. All published articles are going to live in your archived tab. And then you can view your article by clicking into it, by clicking on view. This is your individual article dashboard. You'll see that the articles are always going to be in production already. And then in the publication tab, this is where any post-publication changes are going to happen is under that publication tab. So the first demo we'll do is the unpublish and republish process. You'll have this big red notice saying that the version has been published and cannot be edited. So in order to edit it, you must unpublish it first. So I'll go ahead and click on unpublish. And in this case, the change I want to make is under contributors. So what I'll do is go into the list of contributors and edit the contributor. Let's save. And then you'll also want to change your full text and anywhere else that might be mentioned. Sorry. Click on change file. By changing the file, you'll replace the file's URL with the new file. So the URL stays the same and doesn't generate any new URLs. That way, if somebody has just a link to your full text, they can do that. Click on it and get where they need to be. And in this case, you are uploading a revision of an existing file. So you're going to click on the file that you want to revise. Now we'll upload the new file. And on that full text, I've already changed the name using my PDF editor. Continue and confirm. The copyright holder's name may also need to be changed if the author is the copyright holder. What we always recommend is for you to go through every tab. If you publish bilingually, make sure you're also going through both language tabs and just check that everything looks good. One of the things that you might also want to check is the reference list. If the author cited one of their own past works, you might want to update those. And just carefully go through each tab in both languages. If everything looks good, you can save it. If you want to backdate the publication date to a different date, you can change it there, and then click on schedule for publication again. Then you can go ahead and republish it. So that will have the new name, and the PDF full text will also have the new name of the author. Sorry, my examples are not super consistent. In this case, the next thing you'll want to do is let whoever manages your Crossref or other distribution accounts know. If that is you, you might need to go into Tools and resubmit through the plugins a new updated metadata sheet so that Crossref, DOAJ, whoever is distributing those articles also have the most up-to-date author name. Okay, so the next example I wanted to show you is a versioning example, which also, a retraction example, which also uses the unpublish and republish, but does it very visibly. So in this case, we don't want the unedited full text to be floating around in the world. So what we'll want to do is replace that with a full text article that very clearly says that this paper has been retracted, but not erase the citation and publication record, and being transparent about the reasons why. So in this case, we'll unpublish it again before editing. In the title, you might want to add a very clear notice that an article has been retracted. And maybe in the abstract, you also want to add an editor's note about why. Go ahead and save that. Again, just a reminder to check all of your languages if you do publish in more than one language. In this case, you don't need to make any changes to the contributors, but you might want to go through all of the tabs again, just in case anything needs changing. And here I'll also want to change the PDF again, so that the anybody with a link will still have, will be able to see the new article. Okay, and I forgot to mention there is a preview function, so you can go ahead and check that everything looks like it's supposed to. In this PDF, what we recommend is to have a very clear notice about how this paper has been retracted, and then on each page also have a big retracted. So people can still read the original content, but they know that it is no longer it's no longer accessible as an unedited version. You can also add a note to this full text about why the paper was retracted. Once all of that looks good to you, or maybe you want to add more notes, you can schedule it for publication back in the original place. If you do want to make a retraction notice in your most recent issue addressing this, you can cite the DOI to the original article and link them back that way. So our final demo is for the versioning feature. So for the versioning feature, instead of clicking on unpublish from that article dashboard, you'll go ahead and click on create new version. You have to check like, yes, new version, please. And in this case, there will be two versions available. Again, maybe in the abstract, you want to add a note about how on a specific date, certain changes might have been added. Save that and go through each of your tabs and make sure it looks right. In this case, you can change this file to be your new version. But in the upload, it will still retain your old version. You can preview it just like before. And click publish to publish the new version. So you can see that the old version is still published. So while you're working on a new version, the old version will stay live. It's only when you click on publish on the new version that the new version will go live. They'll both share the same root DOI. I'll show you what that looks like on the reader side. On the reader side, the URL and DOI will stay the same. You'll see that there is a version that says updated on a certain date. And then you can see this is version 2 or version 1. If you want to click on version 1, there's going to be a notice at the top for readers that says this is an outdated version, published yesterday. You can read the most recent version here, but the old version is still available to read and will remain available to read, although they do have the same identities. If any of the metadata changes, again, let your DOI and DOAJ administrators know so that the new metadata can be updated. If you don't change any metadata, you might still want to update those records in case there's full text indexing. So that's the versioning feature. And I'm just at 3 minutes to go. So I'll stop sharing my screen if anybody wants to share or have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. I'll stop the recording now.